Hey, what's up guys? JB here. So we're back again today, looking at the return of the Final Fantasy Tactics collaboration in War of the Visions. If you missed part 1 where I covered both Ramza and Orlando, I will go ahead and put a link to that above, so definitely go and check that one out. For the rest of you here, today we're going to be diving into some beloved characters here in Agrias and Delita. Now, Agrias, of course, on her initial release, was one of the best bruisers and tanks of the level 99 era. And to be honest, she was just one of the better units in the game, for quite some time. She had good all-around damage mitigation and excelled in most situations. Now, Delita, on the other hand, was a unit that had his fans, but never excelled even at taking down his banner mate, even while having that elemental advantage. As one of the main issues that he had was just that he lacked any sort of defense or damage penetrations as we began to move in an era where that was really becoming vital in the game. So these two units are finally going to be getting their EX jobs, but how do their kits actually hold up in the level 120 era of War of the Visions? Well, today we're going to be taking a look at those EX enhancements as well as some job revisions that are slated to come a little bit later. And I'll give you my thoughts on where these units stand in the current state of the game. So with that said, guys, let's just dive right into it. And we're going to start with Delita today, and looking at his TMR, it is definitely super niche. It actually does mirror Ramza's quite closely, only that it's actually giving AP instead of TP, which I can actually say I have used quite a few times in Trials of Reckoning to pretty good effect. Outside of that niche situation, I definitely don't think that this is a great TMR, whatsoever. Stat-wise for Delita, he's actually not too shabby here. He is actually above average in several categories, including HP, attack, and luck, as you can see here. The only stat that is really below average for him is that dexterity, which I think if I had to pick one of the 5 major stats to be weaker in, I think that definitely would be the one. I think the one that I was most surprised here in the stats was that base luck value of 198, which actually does put him in the top 5 for that category in Global today, and very impressive for a base luck value. And I think that that actually does give this unit some promise for the future that we will talk about a little bit later. Now for his Mastery 2 upgrade, he is getting that standard Fire Elemental Mastery. In addition to that, he is getting 30 defense penetration, similar to Orlando. And standing out the most here is going to be that innate, always on, 3-hit, 50% physical barrier. This is a significant upgrade for Delita and his survivability. He definitely always profiled as a physical bruiser, but just maybe lacked a few of the tools to do so, including a barrier. So I think this is a very nice upgrade for him, and that he'll just always have this on innately, and you will not have to buff it on whatsoever, so I do like that one quite a bit. Aside from that though, not really much has changed in terms of his defensive stats here. And just as on his initial release, we are looking at a unit here who just has an extreme weakness to magic, coming in at that -20. Now moving into Delita's EX upgrades, and his first one is an upgrade to one of his Squire job passives, which is an acquired AP up. And this one is going to add 25 accuracy as well as 40% slash res penetration onto it. I think this actually makes it a very nice passive here now, and one that you'll definitely want to have on him at all times. That 25 accuracy there, along with the very strong base luck that we talked about, actually I think do have Delita to be in a position to be built hyper accurate as well. Now his next upgrade here is to his Karma Blade ability, and this one is actually a pretty unique skill. It's actually one of just 2 48% potency imperils in War of the Visions. Now the only real change that's happening to this skill is that Fire Imperil is now going to be coming before the damage. And there's really no other way to say it, this is just a devastating ability now. One that definitely has the potential to one-punch many units out there, and it's easily going to become one of his hardest hitting skills. I do wish that it had a little bit longer range on it, it just has that 1-tile reach, but at that point I think it probably would be pretty overpowered. This is actually more powerful than the majority of the limit bursts in the game. If you're able to get Delita into range where he can use this skill, I think it is a phenomenal ability, and I think it's going to be good for really any mode of play. His final upgrade here is his Job 25 ability, and this is giving him a couple of things, and the first one is some much needed area of effect in his kit. Now notably, all of his main job attacks are single target, and it definitely was always one of his weaknesses. Aside from that though, it is actually giving him a bit of range here, as this one actually does get up to 5 range on the AoE. And that definitely helps address one of the other weaknesses that he had in this kit, which was that lack of range. This one is another 200% modifier. That is one of the hallmarks for him. He does have very large modifiers. Now this one does come with an effect prior to the damage, and this one is actually going to dispel re-raise from your targets. So we do have very nice utility here, coming alongside the damage. And one thing that Fire certainly has been lacking, thus far, has been the ability to dispel either a mortal or a re-raise. So it definitely is a nice boon for the element to see that added in here. So I think overall here with the EX job, Delita is picking up 3 nice upgrades here. And, his damage capability along with the innate penetrations that he's picking up from the mastery and passive upgrades, I think are going to be much improved as well. All right, guys, so moving on real quickly, I just want to highlight, a couple of notable skills, within his sub jobs. And first off, I want to say, unlike Ramza, his Squire sub job is actually pretty good. And I think it is something that you could consider using in some situations. Perhaps you're in a situation where you don't need, one of his paladin or soldier skills, or maybe courage is just banned in the rule set. Now, within Squire, he does have access to Judgment Blade, which is identical to Agrias' original version. Perhaps more importantly, though, is that he does have a skill here called Meditate, and that's going to give him a large attack buff of 60%, and in addition, it does decrease his AP consumption by 40%. Now, I think using that, along with some other tools, that could definitely put him in a position where he could run bells free, so that is always nice. I have always loved, this Meditate skill, and I believe that it has always been one of the biggest blunders by Gumi, with this particular unit. If you were to trade out the Chance skill from his main kit and put Meditate in its place, it would absolutely transform the unit and how he could be used. I think the 2 core issues that Delita has always had was really a lack of any usable TP buffs within his main kit, and definitely a lack of AP generation and sustain. Gumi, if you're listening, definitely make that change. I think that a lot of Delita fans out there would be very, very happy. Now, Delita does have access to the Paladin subjob, and this was bar none the most widely used subjob on Delita back in the day, and probably will continue to be so, into the future. Immortal Spirit, has really become a meta skill, and it is a very, very good one to have access to. Delita does get Sentinel here as well, which has always been a nice tool to approach an enemy. Delita does get access to Sentinel within Paladin as well, which, as always, has been a nice tool for approaching an enemy. All right, so let's move on and look at some actual revisions to the soldier job that actually just came out recently on the JP side, and we can look forward to seeing these here on global, within a few months. Now, soldier, I would say, gets some moderate upgrades. It's probably in the middle of the pack if I were rating, all of the job revisions so far. Now, the first update that we're going to look at is for self-sacrifice, and I think this is one of the better changes that soldier is going to get. And this skill today on global at its max level will reduce all of your resistances by 8% when you equip it. This is going to get changed to just a negative 3% on those resistances, so I think this is actually a pretty good change. And I think when it comes to soldiers, sometimes you had to weigh whether or not you wanted to use this, especially for a unit like Delita, who already had that innate negative 20% to magic, and this one just bringing him down even further to negative 28%. Very, very hard to overcome that at that point. So I do think this is pretty good, and I think it makes the passive a lot more usable and palatable, to use at that point. Now, the second upgrade for soldier is to Paralyzing Edge. The modifier on this one is going from an 86% up to a 121%, and notably this is becoming a guaranteed hit. I think this is going to be very nice for some soldiers out there. I'm not sure it's as interesting in Delita's case. As we sort of alluded to, he can very easily be built in a hyper accurate way. He has that great base luck, and especially when you consider his vision card Blades of Grass, it also gives that accuracy. Next up is the Hazard Break skill. Now, one of the hallmarks of the soldier job has always been trading away hit points in order to use the abilities. I've always thought that that is a pretty lame aspect to the soldier job, especially when these skills have a high AP cost in many situations on top of that. I think that if you were trading away that health and maybe these skills cost a lot less AP wise than they do today, at that point maybe it's worth the trade and maybe makes that job a little bit more interesting. Now, in terms of enhancing this skill, they haven't completely eliminated that health cost, but they have reduced it significantly. Today, it's an insane 25% reduction to your health. It's going down to just a 10% reduction, which is much more usable, I'd say. So, relatively speaking, I think that's fine. I just wish they had eliminated it entirely, but, whatever. This skill does get another nice upgrade on it, though, in that it will dispel Protect from your targets, and it is an AoE. It's a cross AoE here on Hazard Break, and it still does retain that nice 225% modifier on it as well. And that's definitely always been one of the best things about Hazard Break. Now, we are getting one final upgrade to Soldier here, and that is on the Hazard Spin skill. And this one, again, is getting that health cost reduced to a negative 10%. The AP cost is getting reduced on this one as well. Before, it was a near unusable 38 AP cost, and that is going down to 26 AP. So just a quality of life just to make the skill a little bit more usable, I'd say. Nothing crazy there. So these upgrades here, are fine enough. I don't think that these particular ones are going to change his standing in a big way or really his meta viability all that much. I think probably the biggest takeaway here is that self-sacrifice skill. I do like that quite a bit. And certainly that hazard break, could see some situational use if you needed some of that utility in terms of dispelling protect in your party. All right, moving on, and here is actually an anti-ice team that I put together featuring Delita. And you can see here his attack potential, is actually quite high. I'm actually able to get his attack stat here at almost 1900. Of course, as we talked about, self-sacrifice does lower his defensive potential, just a bit. But, in a counter element matchup, I think that he'll actually be fine, especially with that innate barrier that we talked about. Now, I have paired him here with King Mont and Glaciella, and I do actually kind of like Glacie in this setup, over Terra, so that she might have some ability to drop some heals either onto Mont or Delita, either on the approach towards the enemy or maybe in between Guild War strikes. Otherwise, if it was a smaller map where things like that weren't possible, I would probably look at somebody like Terra. Now, I think this build just kind of shows the state of fire vision cards at the moment. I've had to turn to many older vision cards here or rainbow effective vision cards, and c'est la vie when it comes to fire. But at least you have some idea of what Delita is capable of here. And certainly, the stats are pretty good, even in spite of that vision card situation. Now, all of my attackers here in the build are coming up with more than 60% ice resistance, which would be very, very nice. And that is actually the main reason I have used Ifrit here on Delita, not only for the innate ice resistance that it has, but also to pick up some missile resistance and fire attack there as well. And that actually will be very nice, going up against some future ice missile teams. Now, I have given Delita here an attack set. It's not one that I always like to use. There are other great options like agility or AP sets. But, in terms of a unit like Delita, who is just really lacking when it comes to innate defense penetration, I think that it actually can be a decent set for him, especially if you're looking to him to actually put out some good damage for you. Now, with the addition of the Dragon Quest collaboration on the Japanese side with Saro and his great new vision card that have just come out recently, I think that there is actually some nice potential there in the future for Delita to be used alongside Saro, or at a minimum with that vision card. The luck of 35% that comes on that card just synergizes very well with Delita's base stats. And I think if you were to pair that new luck vision card with Delita's own Blades of Grass, Delita suddenly becomes a very scary and capable evade hunter. So what is my view here on Delita overall? Well, as we've talked about, with those added penetrations that he's getting and some of the changes that they've made to his skills, I do believe that he's really become an attacker that you do have to respect now. And he will be capable of putting out some pretty decent damage. Even more so in the future, if Fire were to get a party-wide defense penetration vision card. As we talked about, his accuracy potential is also quite high. And if you are to focus on it, I would say that accuracy probably is one of his best assets. With the Immortal Spirit that he already had access to and his new 50% innate barrier, his physical bulk and bruising capability also has been shored up and improved quite well. And all the while he's offering a couple of nice utility options with that large fire and peril and that re-raise removal. My main issues with Delita, really do center around the AP generation capability within his main kit. And I really think it was a missed opportunity on Gumi's end, not to move that meditate skill into his main job in lieu of that chant skill. And I think because of that, to use this unit effectively, you probably are looking at an AP restore, type TMR to really leverage the power of this unit. Now, Delita is also very much lacking when it comes to support and buffs that he can offer the team, which are really non-existent, as of now. And that is an issue that has really always been there for him. He is also bringing that large weakness to magic as well, which really makes him unusable, against that form of damage. All in all, though, I think they've done a pretty decent job here with Delita in sort of shoring up a few weaknesses that he had and sort of getting him into a more usable and viable spot in the meta. And I think because of that, he does have the ability to be used competitively in PvP against more physically focused teams. And certainly when you consider a potential ice meta, coming in the near future, I think that he is a good low-cost option in combating that as well. If you happen to have the Exorcist Vision card, you can add a top-tier guild raid unit to your fire team as well. He is bringing that 48% fire debuff, which will be very handy and really amplify the damage of your guild raid squad. Alright guys, so next we're going to be looking at Agrias here. And along with Orlando, she was really the crown jewel of the original Tactics run. She had a very long period of relevance on her initial release, as even in the level 99 era, fire units were fairly non-existent. Of course, barrier breaks and penetrations, weren't really as prevalent back then, so she could really be tanky against pretty much anything that you threw at her. So enough with the history lesson, what about the unit itself? Well, starting with her TMR, out of all of the TMRs, in the tactics rerun here, this one probably holds up the best. And it is one that I still use from time to time. It's bringing both Protect and Shell to the caster, which are still very valuable effects in PvP. It does really help that the base stats on the armor are pretty nice too. I just wish that there was a way to get 2 casts on these older TMR items. If there was a way that we were able to do that and enhance these in the future, I think that that could make this, even more valuable. Now, in terms of stat upgrades here for Agrias, where does she end up? Well, she actually has one of the best HP values in the game for both base and innate. Her attack value here actually leaves a lot to be desired. It's coming in well below average. Not all that unexpected, for a sort of a frontline, tanker style unit, but still something you need to consider, in terms of her damage output. For Dex and Luck, there is some good and bad here. The good is that she does have very nice base values for both of these categories. The boost from her board, though, does trail off, and she does end up just around average for both. The takeaway, though, is that she will scale pretty nicely in both of those stats, when it comes to boosts coming from vision cards or trust stones. Now, in terms of accuracy, she is coming in at sort of an average level there. She's actually pretty similar to Esther, in that realm. But, with heavy investment, she actually can be built in a way to deal with evade units. But, you really have to go all out for it. Now, on the agility front, we're definitely not looking amazing here in terms of that innate 53 agility. She does actually get a nice bump up there on the board, and it just brings her to an average level. I'm not actually too worried about that, though. In her case, she does actually have not one, but 2 different agility passives that she can potentially use when her cleric subjob gets its upgrade here in a couple of months. And with that, she would actually have the potential to become one of the fastest units in War of the Visions if you needed her to. Now, taking a quick look at the Mastery 2 enhancements that she's getting here next. I have actually talked about this one a little bit before in some of my other videos. It is very disappointing, in terms of the actual upgrade that it's getting. She initially had 15 single target or unit resistance as her mastery, and that was admittedly a great initial mastery. I'd say one of the better ones for back in that era. So what they've done is they've bumped that up another 5, so that gets up to 20, and then they've tacked on an additional 15 spirit here. I think that this is just an incredibly lazy and underwhelming Mastery 2 ability, especially when we compare it directly against her other Final Fantasy Tactics brethren, units who were getting things like limit burst upgrades and innate barriers. I really wish they had thrown just another effect on here, maybe some accuracy or maybe even some defense penetration. Maybe even something like an increase to her chance to land stop or disable would have been nice as well. So that 15 spirit that she's picking up here, it does get her up to an innate total of 25. Definitely one of the highest base totals that's there in the game. Nothing else is changing here, in terms of the defensive stats and resistances. Notably, she does still have that 20% magic resistance. It's always been one of the better things in terms of a resistance, but nothing else is changing here, though, in terms of the defense statistics. All right, moving on to Agrias' EX job upgrades, and first and foremost, her Knights of Honor passive ability is getting an upgrade. It was already probably one of her best passive abilities, and it's just going to get a bit better, especially for autoplay when you might want to have her tanking out front for your team. And she is picking up a 5 innate hate value, as well as a 20% decrease in her AP usage. So obviously, this just helps her innate tanking capability. In the age of dispels, innate hate is an absolute must for your tank to be viable. So I think with this, she could either be used as your full-on tank, or maybe you could even just use her more of like a bruiser, like a Dwayne has been used in the past, where she might command a couple of hits and then the hate would fall elsewhere. Of course, you can combine this with her active hate generation from her Paladin job. She does have Taunting Blade there. And of course, we do have the Fryaevia vision card here on Global, which does have another 5 potential hate that it can add. Just keep in mind that that is a magic-based vision card, and it will diminish her offensive capability even further. Now, her next EX upgrade here is to one of her marquee skills, which is her Judgment Blade. And this skill is probably one of the main reasons why Agrias was such a good unit for so long, as it does carry that chance to stop in a cross AoE of 25%. This skill is getting a pretty significant upgrade in its utility, as it's going to dispel re-raise on the targets before it hits. It does also have an increased chance to hit your targets with a 30% hit modifier on it as well. Now, re-raise dispel is definitely always nice to have. You can think of Agrias excelling pretty well against a unit like Dark Fina, who does bring that along in her kit. The hit chance here on this is a pretty nice upgrade as well. As we were just talking about, Agrias' accuracy, isn't all that stellar. Now, when they had initially teased the tactics return on the Japanese side in one of their live streams, they had said that they were toying with the idea of increasing Agrias' chance to land status effects. I've said this before, but I really do wish that they had gone that direction. In the current era of the game, we just have so many different ways now that status effects can be nullified that really didn't exist before on Agrias' initial run. We do have now 3-star espers, we have equipment and trust stones that can block those, and we also have many new active abilities that are also introduced in the game that can also nullify those as well. Now, the final EX upgrade here for Agrias is going to be her all-new Job 25 ability. This is a range 3 with a range height of 1. It is a 165% modifier single target skill. Now, prior to the damage, it will break physical barriers and any protect status that may be present on your target. So I like this one fine enough. I think it is pretty good. Two of the main ways that opponents out there might try to mitigate your damage, is with these two particular statuses. So it's definitely nice that Agrias can remove those in one fell sweep. Now, in terms of other notable skills for Agrias and her sub-jobs, I do really like the Royal Guard's protection that comes in her main job sub. This is a 3-hit 35% magical barrier that she can actually put onto herself and to allies. Maybe not something that you would look to use if you had her tanking and you want her to be your front line. This would draw her towards her team in order to buff them up. But I do think that it is very useful if you're having Agrias in more of an off-tank role or maybe more of a supportive role. Now, her paladin job, definitely was always the sub-job of choice back in the day. Taunting Blade, was key for using her as a tank, as it was her only way to actually generate any hate. It is actually her longest range skill as well, at up to range 5. Along with that, she does have some very nice mitigation tools here as well in Saintly Wall and Sentinel. Now, I have actually been cooking up a build for Agrias where I can actually get her up to about 110 spirit, and Sentinel would then push her up to 155 spirit, which is absolutely nutty. Now, if you think about units out there that maybe have 70% spirit penetration, which is actually would be an above average value in that department, with Sentinel active on Agrias, she would be mitigating roughly 47% of that incoming damage just from the spirit alone. So I'd say that is actually a pretty good strength of Agrias, and in her case anyway, spirit is not quite dead yet. Now, Agrias does have a sub-job which has been enhanced on the Japanese side, and that is her Cleric sub-job. Among all of the earliest jobs, I'd say Cleric was certainly one of the weaker ones, much to Ma Cherie's chagrin. Of course, much of Cleric's utility is based around magic, but, there are actually some very nice skills here that Agrias could leverage, especially after they get upgraded. Now, first of all, the Spirit level 1 passive is getting enhanced, and that is one that I actually alluded to earlier in the video. And this one, in addition to the 15 Spirit that it provides today, in a couple of months will be added 12% agility onto that. So it's a great passive that's actually going to mirror pretty closely her Knight's Honor passive. And like I said, it does give her the ability to get up to a 24% enhancement in her agility. Now, the Cure skill is also getting an enhancement. It's going up to a Curata level heal at 210 times. And, another build that I was actually cooking up was sort of a magic-based Agrias, just, to see if maybe something like this would be viable to use, along with her auto-cure ability. Now, going absolutely all out, balls to the wall with magic, I was able to get her a little over 800 magic, along with 20 healing power. And I think there, the heals would be, fairly lackluster still, but maybe somewhat usable. I really don't think that that build is all that worth it, and, I probably wouldn't go that direction. But, maybe if you were doing it in a party with Velis and another mage, maybe that's something to look at, especially if you were trying to leverage that auto cure ability. Now, in terms of the AI leveraging the skill, I don't foresee that really happening, but, anytime you have manual control or maybe in a brutal event, removing debuffs, maybe something that could be interesting. Now, Calamity Guard is probably the skill that I'm most intrigued by in Cleric with the enhancements that it will be getting, and it will actually be covering now a majority of the status effects in the game, though some of the notable ones that are still missing would be Disable, Stun, Slow, and Berserk. On top of that ailment protection though, some additional utility is being added in, and that's in the form of a one-hit 50% all damage barrier. It's also going to be increasing the HP of the targets by 15% for 3 turns. I think this is actually a very legit skill now, and definitely a reason that you might look to run this sub-job. I do think that there are definite scenarios where this ability could be very, very powerful. Alright, here is a win killer build that I put together for Agrias, and this is going to be a double bruiser setup once again with Snow and Velis. So in the build we're going to have some wind resistance, along with the normal single target and area resist. Now even with that elemental advantage that ice will have over winds, getting through a unit like Joom is going to be no small task for Agrias. Remember though that Agrias does have that ability to dispel both protect and barriers, and definitely both things that are commonly seen on a unit like Joom. So that certainly will help that situation considerably. The other hurdle for Agrias is going to be that massive defense on Joom. So with that, I am trying to maximize Agrias' defense penetration potential as much as I possibly can, and that is going to be helped substantially by Snow's vision card. Of course, that brings the party effect for ice of 25 defense penetration. And I will say, if you're trying to have Agrias at her best, this vision card, regardless if you get Snow or not, is a must pull for Agrias. Of course, she has no defense penetration innately, so the 25 that she can pick up from this vision card I think will help her in a big way. Now to enhance that even further, I have used an attack set here and the Trust Stone set to pick up another 10 there, and then of course I do have a 10 defense penetration from the Trust Stone passive as well. So again, I'm not going too in-depth here on these builds. This one is a pretty straightforward, just sort of a win killer build, going up against somebody like Revolution Glassy, who actually we will be getting here very soon in Global, probably as early as next week. On that note though, I will probably be looking to make a build guide video for Agrias, sometime here in the next 1 to 2 weeks. And after I've had some time to actually get a better feel of what she's actually capable of, beyond just the theory craft. So what is my take on Agrias here overall? For my pros, she did get some nice added attack-based utility with the area of effect re-raise removal, as well as that new attack that will remove both the barrier and protect effects. And the pure amount of utility and support options that this unit has access to, between the EX and sub-job enhancements that are on the way, on top of what she already had to begin with, are definitely one of this unit's greatest strengths. Now in terms of her tanking prowess, she definitely will remain a stout tank and bruiser, especially when it comes to magical scale damage, and she definitely did get the much needed passive hate that she did need to be functional when tanking from an auto perspective. On top of those things, she does still have some nice mitigation tools, coming from the Paladin sub-job that we talked about, as well as from her main job sub from that magic barrier as well. And there is actually some potential in the future that this tanking ability could get enhanced even further in the future, if Paladin sees some significant upgrades. I will say, on that tanking front, while not necessarily up to par of maybe the latest and greatest 90 and 100 cost tanks, and she isn't bringing the latest tools when it comes to heal back abilities or re-raise or courage, or even things like protect or shell. I will say you can make up for some of those things, with external buffs or TMRs. Maybe even a re-raise from a support unit. Another thing to watch out for is that her hate generation, on top of that 5 she gets innately, is very, very costly AP-wise. Her Taunting Blade skill is very expensive. And in the past, pretty much guaranteed that she had to use these as bells in order to function properly in many situations. Now in terms of cons for this unit, I did touch on the status ailment issue. Unfortunately, the game has just evolved beyond, those base 25% chance skills, making it very easy now to nullify them completely either through a 3-star Esper or a Trust Stone passive. So again, I do very much wish that the chance to land her statuses had been enhanced, as they initially had mentioned in the Tactics rerun announcement in JP. Aside from that issue, her damage potential is definitely limited as well, especially when we're talking tankier units, mainly due to that complete lack of defense or /res penetrations. So just to reiterate, even if you don't go for Snow, I would highly advise, picking up his vision card if you do plan on using this unit. Even despite those shortcomings, at the end of the day, this unit along with Orlando are still the crown jewels of this collaboration, and if PvP is your interest, are still the most viable units of the bunch. And I think that she will remain a solid and viable choice, into the future for both manual and auto styles of play. If nothing else, but because she is just a Swiss Army knife of a unit, with all of the different tools that she has at her disposal. Alright guys, so another bonus section here with the vision card Blades of Grass, and they are actually giving this one out for free as a login bonus during the collaboration, and it is actually getting a bingo board on top of that for some free shards. So honestly, considering all that, this is going to be a very cheap card to build. I know that during the light evasion Asian meta, this is definitely a card that some people out there were kicking themselves that they hadn't built out in the past, as they didn't have access to that 25 unconditional accuracy for their party. Now it is actually getting a global exclusive upgrade for Delita when he equips the card. I don't actually have the numbers on that yet, but I'm going to guess it's probably going to be somewhere between a 10 and 20% slash res penetration, and then a 10 slash attack modifier for him. And I think if that's the case, that is a pretty decent buff for Delita. And I think that this buff on the card here, along with the slash res penetration that he's getting innately in his EX jobs, definitely puts him in a position where he can largely ignore slash resistance, which will be very, very nice for him. So if you are planning on building out Delita, I would definitely build this card as well, no question. And even if you don't go for Delita, I definitely think it's a worthy investment, considering how cheap it will be to build when you consider vision stars and things like that on top of the free get and the bingo board. So coming into the conclusion here, guys, and for veterans and fans of the Tactics series, as we talked about in the 2 videos here, I do think that there are actually nice things that we can look at for each and every one of these units. And yes, that even includes Ramza and Delita for their PvE niches. And Delita, I think, actually does have some viability as a physical bruiser as well from a PvP perspective. On the PvP front, though, Agrias and Orlando are no doubt the best of the bunch in my view, and I think that they certainly do hit above their cost level. So for those of us out there, who do have these units from before, I do think that there is some nice things here to look forward to, and I do think that these upgrades are going to serve us quite well. I think that the question for newer folks out there, or for people who didn't get these units in the past, are these units worth pulling in the current state of the game? If you are a meta chaser or a free-to-play player, looking to get the most bang for your Vizzy or buck, if these units are coming in on a 42k to pity, I'm not sure that they're going to give you the best value, for your Vizzy or spend, especially when you're comparing them against the latest and greatest cost 90 and 100 units who have yet to receive even their Mastery 2 or any enhancements whatsoever. I will say though that, while chasing the meta can be fun and interesting in its own way, I think that it is important to remember at the end of the day that this is a game, and sometimes pulling for a unit that we like or holding a special place in our hearts is worthwhile and fulfilling in its own right. And if that's the case for you, don't deny yourself the joy of picking up a part of nostalgia just because they don't have all the latest and greatest bells and whistles. On the other hand, if these units don't hold that special place in your heart, then no, despite having some viability in certain aspects of the game, I don't think that they're particularly worth that 42k Vizzy or price tag, as much as it pains me to say it. But I think they're definitely worth, a special deal or maybe a 2-for-1 style pity. We'll just have to see what the banners look like here in a couple of days. So those are my thoughts, guys, and that is going to wrap up this special edition series here that I've put together on Final Fantasy Tactics. I hope that this was informative for you guys out there, and I really hope that it helps you with the decision-making process. I, for one, am very excited for these units to return. I really can't wait to EX them and really start using them again. They are the #1 reason I started playing this game in the first place. Tell me what you guys think in the comments, where you stand on these units, what you are most excited about and what your pull plans are. And if you enjoyed the video today, hit that like button. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. And if you like what I'm doing here on the channel, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. And that's really all I have to say for today. So as always, stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.